Good morning and welcome. Of all the meetings that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will do this month with world leaders, one is most significant. One meeting impacts more people than any other. The meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Yesterday we saw the both of them enjoy a casual evening walking at the riverfront. But at that time, there was a deep Chinese incursion taking place. The worst Chinese incursion in the last several years. Chinese soldiers intruding up to 4 kilometers inside Indian territory. Could the Chinese president not have known what the PLA was up to? Will Prime Minister Narendra Modi take these issues up seriously and significantly with the Chinese president when he meets him? These, of course, are live images now from Rashtrapathi Bhavan. You see President Pranab Mukherjee, Prime Minister Narendra Modi waiting for the Chinese president to arrive at the forecourt of Rashtrapathi Bhavan this morning. I want to introduce our guest, Major General Ashok Mehta. He was at a dinner with the army chief and has interesting insights into what really is going on along the line of actual control. With us also, Jyoti Malhotra, senior writer at India Today magazine. Sushant Sareen, one of India's top defense experts. Priyanka Chaturvedi represents the Congress party. I want to go across first and foremost to Sushant. How serious, Sushant, do you believe these border incursions are? We're being told 4-5 kilometers into Indian soil. Some reports suggest that more than 1,000 Chinese soldiers could have come in. There are 3 live incursions taking place at this time. The sense is that the Ministry of External Affairs, in its bid to create bonhomie, is trying to underplay the threat. Could the Chinese president possibly not know that the PLA is up to these games along the LAC, or do you think this is part of a calibrated design, as most things with China usually are?
You know, I would look at this whole thing in 2 ways. First is, of course, this particular incursion, but I wouldn't rate that very seriously, very high on the meter, for a very simple reason, because some of these kind of things have happened in the past as well. So, in a manner of speaking, there is really nothing very unusual of this kind of a thing, and we don't even have all the facts before us as of now. But that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, what is the kind of messaging which is taking place, especially at a time when the Chinese president is in India, and this kind of a thing, which the Chinese very well know is an irritant in Indo-China relations. So should this kind of a thing be taking place at this point in time? So that raises a question as to why this kind of an incursion has happened. Either the Chinese lines of communication are so badly messed up that the right hand of China does not know what the left hand is doing. It's possible, but unlikely. The other thing is, could this be, because we've been hearing of some kind of a tussle also taking place within the Chinese ruling hierarchy, could this be some kind of a way in which either there is some kind of an internal tussle which is being reflected out here to make the Chinese president look kind of bad in India, or could it be that this is the way the Chinese are trying to reassure the Pakistanis that regardless of the kind of optics which you see with Mr. Xi Jinping's visit to India, it does not really...
No, but there is a big difference. What you're saying is contradictory at several levels, Sushant Sareen. First and foremost, China is not Pakistan. It's not as if Nawaz Sharif is in India and the ISI and the Pakistani army want to show who's boss. The Chinese President, General Ashok Mehta, is boss in China. There is no dispute about that. A deep incursion of the sort that we've seen, 1,000 Chinese soldiers locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation along the border, the worst transgression into Indian territory in several years. Can this happen without Xi Jinping knowing about it?
No, absolutely not. I think this matter is far more serious than our media or the officials are portraying. So you have to realize that there is a method to the Chinese madness. This is not the first time the Chinese have timed an intrusion of such a nature. Not one intrusion, 3 intrusions, 2 flag meetings held, no result. The National Security Advisor is poring over maps of the intrusion sites to examine why is this happening. The Chinese President Xi is not only the chairman of the Central Military Commission, he is also the chairman of the newly constituted National Security Commission, which means that all security matters, whether it is border guards, whether it is the PLA, are approved, or he knows what's happening. And in any case, he's reading Indian newspapers. And if he is reading Indian newspapers and he's been here for the last 24 hours, the least they could have done is, he could have signaled that, look, pull back for now.
Why do you think they've not done it?
They haven't done it.
Why not?
And the reason, I think, is that this new team of the Chinese leadership is very assertive, is very aggressive, and the areas that they have chosen for this assertion and aggression is the area of Ladakh, the area of Chumar. These are the areas where we have upticked our logistics, the Fukche, Nyoma, Dalot Beg Oldi, and this, don't forget, is the area which is contiguous with the new economic corridor, the land corridor between Kashgar and Gwadar.
I want to go across for a live update to my colleague Jugal Purohit.
Yeah.
He's speaking to various sources in the Ministry of External Affairs to try and determine what the position that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will take will be. Will these matters be taken up forcefully, Jugal, with the Chinese leadership, or will we try and brush them under the carpet in our bid to portray Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai?
Rahul, it's a very, very interesting question, and one is getting mixed signals from the Defence Ministry and the National Security Setup. On one hand, we have been given to understand that nothing will be brushed under the carpet and that every single issue, including what is happening in Demchok, Chumar and then Chumar last night onwards, will be taken up. But the fact is, Rahul, that the Indian Army and the security setup is unusually coy about the entire affair. Despite several, reports in the media, despite several requests, the Indian Army is neither in a position to actually clarify to us what the situation is, what's happening on the ground. There's very little information which is coming through despite all of this, public posturing that is taking place, that we will not be tolerating Chinese transgressions like the ones that the last government did. And speaking about the Chinese precedent and what is happening in Chumar and Demchok, Rahul, last year we had signed what is known as the Border Defence Cooperation Agreement, which was an agreement that the Chinese side had initiated in October last year when Manmohan Singh was in China. It was signed, and the Article 8 very clearly states that when the two armies come face to face, there will be all efforts made to try and de-escalate the situation, keep it below conflict. And if one is to take that into account, and then what happened in Chumar, where we were already reporting two very serious issues of transgression between the two armies, between the two populations there, and last night an entire battalion strength of the border regiment of PLA actually moving in, it only goes to show that the BDCA is not being followed in spirit and letter in spirit by the Chinese side, which initiated it.
Stay with me, Jugal. Stay with me, Jugal. This is very interesting because these pictures of Bonhomie completely marred by reports from Chumar of 1,000 Chinese soldiers locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation with India. I want to bring in Jyoti Malhotra. What are you making, ma'am, of the fact that the Indian Army and the PLA are currently deadlocked at a time when the Chinese president will be walking on the courtyards of Rashtrapathi Bhavan?
Well, Rahul, I think it's fascinating that the Chinese President Xi Jinping is in India, and as you said, the PLA is mounting an incursion across the line of actual control between India and China. But what is interesting is that I think the Chinese, the PLA as well as Xi Jinping, the president, is, I think, testing India. Let's see what Narendra Modi says. There's been all this bonhomie and warmth and affection in Gujarat yesterday on the banks of the Sabarmati in Ahmedabad. But will Prime Minister Modi bite the bullet, and will he tell President Xi that both countries must level with each other and must come to a resolution not only of the line of actual control but also of the border? And I would also want to say that Listen, India and China fought a border war, if you want to call it a conflict, in 1962. It's been more than 55 years. And I think the time has come both for India and China to resolve this border conflict, to come to terms with the fact that China has taken territory, the Aksai Chin part of which is sort of part of the Indian map, is under control of the Chinese, and in Arunachal Pradesh, what the Chinese portray to be as part of their territory, South Tibet or Tawang, is under Indian control. So I think we have to talk seriously, and we've had several rounds of border talks between the special representatives of India and China. Nothing has come of it. In fact, after this visit, there will be yet another round. I think there about 16 or 17 rounds have taken place so far, but there has to be a political resolution of the border. And remember, Rahul, that in 2005, in the first Manmohan Singh government, India and China signed an agreement in which they agreed, as your correspondent just said, that there will be no exchange of settled populations on both sides of the line of actual control. But guess what? A couple of years later, the Chinese walked back on that agreement. So today, when you have the PLA mounting an incursion across the LAC, I think Narendra Modi will perhaps, or I hope he does, tell President Xi that we must reach a political solution on this border. Perhaps they can do it on a status quo, as is, where is sort of basis.
No, but this is something that's been discussed.
It has
in
been discussed.
several
It's been
rounds of
since,
special representatives
not
talks.
only now, it's
but
been
nothing has
since,
so far emerged from
absolutely. In fact, it's been discussed since Chow En Lai and Nehru, then later Deng Xiaoping and Rajiv Gandhi. But nothing has come of it, because I think in those years the Indians were not very keen on this status quo as is.
So here are the guards at the Rashtrapathi Bhavan presenting the ceremonial guard of honor to the Chinese president. Let's just for a moment listen in and capture the atmosphere. What I want to do now is go across live to Beijing. Joining us from there is India Today Group's Anand Krishnan. Tracks China more closely than any other Indian journalist. And I'm deeply confused and perplexed about the double messaging that China is sending out. You've got the Chinese president sitting and eating dokla. There's a bromance brewing of sorts where they're swinging on the banks of the river Sabarmati, and on the other side, you've got a deep conflict, a 5-kilometer incursion. What are you making of this in Beijing, Anand?
Yeah, Rahul, I think in Beijing the sense is very much focusing away from the border for obvious reasons. But I think as a cautionary note, I mean, the Chinese system is so opaque that I think it would be difficult for any of us to read something to this incursion and say, well, you know, China is signaling X, Y, or Z, which is what I think we often tend to do in India. At least officially they say, well, what happens on the border is something that takes place at the local level, and what we would like to see is divorce it from what's happening at the higher levels, which is that...
How is that even possible, Anand? The fact that there is a 5-kilometer incursion, the fact that 1,000 Indian and Chinese troops are in a eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation, the fact that we are having to rush reinforcements and send them towards Chumar clearly shows that things are not okay. How can the Chinese establishment pretend as if life must go on without us even bothering about this minor incursion? It's the most serious incursion in the last several years.
No, I think that's exactly the problem, because you can't divorce one from the other. So, and I think that shows the limits of the current way of doing things, which is, you know, try to keep the border on one side and say we work on other things. But I mean, there are limits to that model. So I think the focus must also be on looking at why it is these incursions are happening, even though we signed a border defense cooperation agreement only 8 months ago, which was designed to prevent such things from happening. So I think there are clearly deficiencies on the mechanisms that are in place, and that should be a cause for worry.
Okay, I want to go across also to Executive Editor Javed Ansari. He's joining us from outside Hyderabad House this morning. That, of course, is where the more substantive meeting will take place once these photo opportunities get over. The ceremonial guard of honor is done with. Here you see Prime Minister Narendra Modi introducing the Chinese president to all the senior leaders. He just met with Najib Jung, the Lieutenant Governor. He's meeting the Air Force Chief. He's meeting the Foreign Secretary, all of them lining up to welcome the Chinese president. Beyond these photo opportunities, Javed, will the issue of the current border incursion be taken up by Prime Minister Modi when he meets the Chinese president, or will they go on eating doklas more?
Well, that will be a real tragedy, because apart from the photo ops, the fact of the matter is that the outstanding issue of the border dispute exists, and that's an issue that needs to be clinched. And this is the test for Mr. Modi. It's all very well to take a stroll, walk side by side with the Chinese president and his wife on the banks of Sabarmati. It's quite another thing to negotiate, do the tough talking. He's done that in public. Now is the question. Now comes the time when he must walk the talk. He needs to talk tough and ensure that China sees India's viewpoint and that these boundary disputes are now settled. There are issues apart from the boundary dispute, but this is the foremost. It's all very well to talk of investment or talk of cooperation in international fora where our political interests converge. But the Indian public and the establishment at large, the main issue is...
Give me a moment, Javed. The President of China is getting set to speak to the Indian press. Let's listen in.
这是我担任国家主席以后的话首次的访问印度。我这个期待通过此访实现3个目标。
Dear friends from the press, this is my first visit to India as the President of the People's Republic of China, and I hope to achieve 3 goals through my visit.
一是传承友谊。中国和印度呢是2大古老文明，拥有着数千年的友好交往。我们一方面为自己的文明所自豪，另一方面呢欣赏尊重对方的文明。我们要大力拓展友好交往，增进互相了解和友谊，让我们2国人民永远的友好下去。
The first purpose is to carry forward our friendship. China and India are both ancient civilizations, with thousands of years of friendly interactions with each other. Our 2 nations not just take pride in our own civilizations, we also admire and respect each other's civilizations. It's important that we expand our friendly contacts, deepen the mutual understanding and friendship between our 2 peoples, and make sure we will always be friends to each other.
2是深化合作。中印都是新兴市场国家，经济的互补性非常强，合作需求空间巨大。我们要着力推动多领域的务实合作，实现优势互补，给2国人民带来更多切实利益。
The second goal is to deepen our cooperation. Both China and India are emerging markets, and there is a strong complementarity between our 2 economies, as well as enormous needs and potential for bilateral cooperation. It's important that we advance all areas of practical cooperation to draw on the complementarity of our 2 countries and to bring tangible benefits to the people of China and India.
3是共谋发展，中印都将发展作为我们的第一要务，发展目标一致，发展理念相似，发展战略是契合的。我们要深度对接发展战略，构建更加紧密的发展伙伴关系，在民族复兴的道路上能够携手前行。
The third goal is to pursue development together. Both China and India see development as our top priority. We have common development goals, similar development philosophies, and compatible development strategies. It's important that we deepen the alignment of our respective development strategies and to build a closer developmental partnership.
中印呢是两个最大的发展中国家和新兴市场国家，也是世界多极化进程的两支重要的力量。两国关系具有战略意义和全球影响。中印携手合作，共同发展，将给25亿的两国人民带来福祉，给亚洲带来繁荣，给世界带来机遇。我期待着同印度领导人一道，做中印关系的积极推动者，携手努力将中印面向和平与繁荣的战略伙伴关系提升到一个新的高度。
China and India are the world's two largest developing countries and emerging markets. We're also two important forces in an increasingly multipolar world. Therefore, our relationship has strategic and global significance. When our two countries work with each other for common development, we can bring benefit to the 2.5 billion people in China and India. We can bring prosperity to Asia, and we can create opportunities for the world. During this visit, I hope to work with the Indian leadership to be strong advocates of China-India relations and to partner with each other to take our strategic and cooperative partnership for peace and prosperity to a higher plane.
谢谢。
Thank you.
If India and China work together, 2.5 billion people will benefit. The Congress, of course, is snapping at the heels of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, saying that this is what candidate Modi promised not to do. I want to go across to Priyanka Chaturvedi from the Congress party to see what she is making of the fact that there is such a deep incursion into Indian territory at a time where the Chinese president is on Indian soil. Priyanka, morning.
Good morning. See, there are a couple of things I would like to mention here. While we welcome all the trade agreements that India signs with China, but we also must keep in mind that our country's self-respect, dignity and security should be of primary concern. Where Congress is concerned, we have raised issues with regards to the intrusions, the incursions, and what we see. I would totally disagree with what Mr. Sareen was saying, where he said we've seen these kind of incursions in the past. No, I beg to differ. The incursions that we are seeing in recent times have not been seen in recent years. As well as you have Chinese nomads putting up tents there, putting up homes there, and Indian army not being able to handle a situation like that, or the Indian government making a stern statement with regards to that, or not even coming forward and explaining what is happening there. We've had 3 incursions and we do not have any statement coming either from the army or from the government. So the priority definitely would be keeping our safety, security in mind before we talk about trade agreements. And when we talk about trade agreements also, we also have to keep in mind how China has reacted to us signing an offshore deal with Vietnam, how we have, they have, during his trip to Maldives, I'm sorry, can I just make my point?
Syed Akbaruddin from the Ministry of External Affairs answering Priyanka Chaturvedi's question on whether border incursions will indeed be taken up by China. The government, despite these photo optics, sending out a message that this issue will not be ignored. What can Prime Minister Modi say? What response can we expect from the Chinese president? What are these games that the dragon plays while the Chinese president walks on Indian soil?